This is the Secure Cyber Connect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance.
Our topics on this episode will be making a positive impact on the cybersecurity industry. Today we're delighted to be joined by Morton and Daniel Killeen. Lee has nearly 2 decades of experience as a technical and operational information security lead, bringing a wealth of experience and expertise in safeguarding digital assets and ensuring robust security protocols. Specialising with information security for some of the world's leading consumer products and across the travel and financial services sector, Lee's developed an extremely strong foundation in IT, having worked as a network manager, where he honed his skills in network architecture and management. His diverse background has also included roles as both a civil engineer and a mechanical engineer, reflecting a broad technical knowledge and problem-solving mindset. He's also a prominent public speaker at many cybersecurity events across the UK and Europe, and his unique blend of engineering and IT experience has allowed him to approach information security with a comprehensive perspective, ensuring innovative and effective solutions for many security challenges. Daniel, his extensive background spans nearly 2 decades within the cybersecurity industry, and he possesses a stellar record within senior sales and sales management roles at many renowned companies such as HP, NTT and Orange Cyberdefense. His unwavering commitment to grasping the true cybersecurity challenges faced by many organisations has culminated in the establishment of Utopia Cyber. With a resolute vision to provide top-tier cybersecurity resources, technology and services to the UK's businesses at a competitive rate, Daniel is confident that with Utopia Cyber they can revolutionise the industry. Confident in Utopia's streamlined and effective approach, he anticipates not only success, but thriving in supporting customers both within the Northern ecosystem and nationwide. Daniel, Lee, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us along.
So we'll kick things off very briefly. If you could just give us a quick high-level overview of some of the key themes that we'll explore in our discussion today.
So yeah, I think it's myself who sort of set this. It's really what we wanted to talk about was using ourselves or our company to make a positive social impact using the cybersecurity industry to do that.
Absolutely. And we always kick off our episodes by asking our guests if you could maybe share something you're proud of or excited about that isn't typically featured on your LinkedIn profile. Lee, if you want to go first, maybe Daniel thereafter.
I've got to admit, I'm going to immediately come back to what we've done here as an entity. So, and I'm probably stealing Dan's thunder because I think he probably wants to use it as well. A few weeks back, we ran our own events where we look to bring a number of information security and IT people and leaders together and look at trying to change the way events go. And it was not just what we did, but it's also the good we did. So we brought money to a local charity that needed that money, and I'll let Dan elaborate on what we did if he needs to, so I won't take too much. But that made a massive difference to me, and it's the fact that with what we did has made a lot of people suddenly go, I love this, I really like what you're doing, and that makes a massive difference to me. So I've not talking too much about it because I understand Dan might want to talk about it, so I'll let Dan do his one.
I think Lee's right, and if I look at on a personal level, last year was a really challenging one for me on a personal level. One of the best bits of last year was I ran 3 marathons and an ultra marathon in 3 months to raise money for the hospital that treated my late father for cancer. And going through something so bad, that was a really bad start to the year. But crossing that finish line, I didn't really care what the time was. I just knew that crossing that finish line, roughly, I'd raised about $4,000 for the Christie Hospital. It ended up being nearly £5,000. And that feeling far outweighed the pain of what had gone earlier in the year, the pain of training. I remember I had to go to Lanzarote on holiday in 25 degrees and run up and down the coast to get training hours in to make sure I could do it. But that feeling was incredible. And then so Lee and I started what we're doing, and we'll talk about this probably more as the podcast goes on. But I will give credit, the whole social enterprise element of it was Lee's idea. Lee talked about it, but then we've both just really gone with it. And now it's a fundamental part of what we do. It's a reason why people want to engage with us. It's a thing that's resonating. And so something like that last year really had a massive impact on me. And what we've done now and what Lee talked about with the event, the plans of what we're going to do in the future are pretty incredible, but it's not going to benefit, it's probably going to benefit a lot more people than just Lee and I. And that's what's really great about this.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to unpacking that as the episode develops. So, one question we always like to sort of ask is, there's always a pivotal moment that I think shapes people's views on cyber. Could you describe maybe a challenge or indeed a particular moment where, that happened, in your own instances? And again, Daniel, maybe then Lee.
Okay, I'll tell the story because again, I'll tell my bit and then Lee will build on it. This happens quite a lot when we're speaking. So it was 2023. I had a very painful experience with my mortgage broker, who's a very good friend of mine. And we had the call to say it's going to be, £500 more monthly per the cost than what it was before. And I'm sat in this meeting and I'm trying to deal with that pain in the best possible way. And so I sat there and went, right, okay, I hear what you're saying to me, but you're a mortgage broker. This thing doesn't really exist in cybersecurity in my industry in the UK. If it does, I'm not really hearing an awful lot about it. So I went and met up with Lee, who has just told me some news that he was moving from one job to another, left one organisation before he was moving to another one. We live quite locally to each other. So we met at the Whitchaff Inn pub in Rottenstall and had a nice dinner. And no alcoholic drinks, I remember. It's just dinner and all drinks. But I just remember saying to Lee when we were talking about his next move, I was going, I had a thought, what do you think about this? And that was really when it was kind of born. And then that dinner happened, many WhatsApp conversations and meetings following that happened as well. Going forward, then 18 months, Utopia Cyber UK happened. So it started, I'm sure a lot of great ideas over the years started in a pub, quite a lot of them when people were drunk. We were very sober, having a nice meal, and it was just the pain of that conversation with the broker made me think about, well, let me think about this in my industry. And Lee, being obviously on the receiving end of it in his role as the head of cyber of a financial service organisation now, he knows the challenges. So I could think of an idea from a sales and commercial perspective, but it needed to resonate with somebody who's in that role. Unfortunately, Lee was telling me, this works, and we just built on it from there. Sorry, Lee, over to you.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about something different. So as a result, Dan's put me in a bit of a predicament here. But he's right. That was what happened and why we got where we were. I think I was going to talk about more regarding how cybersecurity came prominent to me. So obviously, we said originally it's 20 years, but it's actually thinking back, it's probably coming up to 30 years that I've been working in security and IT as a different kind of entities. Still looking back, and it's probably even older than that. I was programming back in '86, so God, it shows how old. Realistically, let's get it right. The big thing that really made me realize that security is important was when ADSL came in, because the organization we were working at the time, we had dial-up. We never thought about the risk of somebody trying to hack our systems, because you just dial up, you do a service, and you turn it off. Internet was not a big kind of always on function. And I remember we set up an FTP server to allow our customers to share data with us. All good. The FTP server didn't get affected, but the next morning the server that was actually used to host the FTP server had a pile of adult material, we'll leave it that on it, installed on it. And it was like, why does this happen? Why is it important? So I've been in a situation where, going back 25 years ago, a system that I was using and managing had been hacked, and it was like, I'm not going to allow this to happen again. And then focused on making sure things were over secure and secure. And it meant that it became a focus of me on my kind of scenario to look at all these risks constantly and try to find a way to protect against them. So that was my pivotal moment, changing from just doing IT to being focused on security, because I had been hacked. The organization I worked for had been hacked. No loss of data, but they ended up with a server full of adult material. And that was not really what we wanted in that system. So I had to change everything, reset everything up, and re-implement new security controls. But back there, it was so hard to get information and security controls. We just had to deal with the changes of infrastructure that we had no idea what to deal with. And that forced me to have to look deeper into security. And therefore, it's become a passion of mine for 20 odd years now.
I appreciate you sharing. And Daniel, could you perhaps share with the audience a mistake that you've made in your career and what important lesson you learned along the way, followed by yourself, Lee?
Honestly, I had 20 years in the sort of the sales commercial side. I definitely, whilst I'm responsible for that Utopia Cyber, that's definitely all that I'm doing now. And I think that anyone can kind of get guilty of looking for how much money you're going to earn. I made a really poor decision at the point of having my first child, and it was about, right, need to earn as much as I can because that's what a good dad does, right? That's it brings that financial security. So didn't really look at the proposition, didn't really look about the amount of time I'd have to spend away from home, didn't really think about the potential impact that could have on health, both physical and mental. Just chase the dollar or chase the pound sterling, and that was the wrong thing to do. And I think that in recent times, it's been more about looking and focusing on what's the broader impact to me, my physical, mental health, my family, my kids, being able to enjoy myself. So looking as a whole, and actually, whilst financial security is important, and it will be important to Utopia Cyber moving forward, all those other things are just as equally as important now, and making decisions with that being the core focus. So yeah, there was probably one bad decision made in 2017, that had a big impact and has influenced every decision I've kind of made moving forward after that.
I appreciate you sharing. You've clearly taken a lot of personal stuff into the business world, and you're in a role now, you're a part of a career, as opposed to it just being a job, I should imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what about yourself, Lee?
Yeah, I think I've already given where I've made a mistake and learned from it. So I'll go on to something else that's it's made me think of how we do things. Going back into the early 2010s, I'm a diver. So I have got PADI qualifications, and I was diving in Egypt through a minesweeper in just off the coast of Hurghada. And like you do, you realize as you're going through the training of it, you must do certain things and you must make sure that you're prepared for every outcome. And as I was diving through the ship, because of my size, I was using a lot more air than most people. And I came out the other side. And as I came out, I realized my air was very low. And luckily, because of all the planning and everything I've put in place and knowing full well and following the rules that PADI state you should do, I ended up with a situation where I actually took half a breath because there's nothing left in my tank on the way back up. And that was at 30 meters underwater. But because of all the preparation that I had in place, and knowing full well I had a dive buddy who was equally skilled as I was, he was right next to us. I'd been warning that I was in this situation, who was able to work together to take me to the surface, following all the standard stops that we have to do on that way back from that level, and had no issues. But at that point, if I hadn't been pre-prepared and pre-set up and make sure everything was right prior, I likely would have died. So it's not a negative, it's a positive that all the things that I took put in place to make sure we were safe and I was protected, found out. What I found out later on is I had a leak in my tank that I didn't know, and that actually exacerbated the issue because I was losing more air than I should have done, and it was a faulty valve that was releasing additional air. And therefore, as I say, it's a weird scenario when you breathe in and you just go, and there's nothing. You can't breathe out, you can't breathe in. It's a horrible feeling, but because I was planned, my dive buddy was there, and I took his additional system and carried up to the surface.
That's an incredible experience. Glad that you're here to tell today. And it sounds like a lot of that sort of carried over into your career, and certainly where we've seen a lot of success for individuals working in the cybersecurity remit, having that muscle memory, the ability to react well under pressure because you've sort of practiced those things in the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing. And well, let's get into a bit more about you guys and your, the founder's journey, if you will. And I think it's pretty clear from when we first spoke to you guys that Utopia and Secure CyberConnect have much in common. There's a very shared perspective on how we can all add value to the cyber community and ultimately assist many businesses within the sector. When we first connected, I think we recognised the value in what you guys were trying to do and really like what we were hearing as it very much resonated with our core values in solving technological and cultural challenges. This has ultimately led to us wanting to have you on the podcast as guests, and both Warren and I have always strongly believed in collaboration over competition. So let's talk a bit more about, when did you guys first meet? We've had the pub story, but what was the moment when you actually realised you shared a vision for change?
I think that, I'll cover that. Lee and I have known each other for about 7 years now, maybe just under 7 years. So I was the sales manager at Orange Cyberdefense, and one member of my team looked after Lee when he was working for a large commercial sort of family products company, a global company. And Lee and I sort of met, and both Northern, both from similar backgrounds, and the accents were quite similar. But I think there was one dinner or one event where I mentioned to somebody where I was from, and that was Rochdale. And Lee picked up on that straight away and came in with the fact that he was also lived in Rochdale. We worked out where we'd grown up. It wasn't too far away from one another. And that sort of started a relationship, a sort of a friendship really, off the back of that. In the role that we had, Lee was a big rugby union fan, and he would go to games and be invited by my former employer or my former employer's sort of sponsors, and they'd always need somebody to go with. And so Lee and I made train journeys down from Manchester down to Twickenham and back. It's a long day that you've got to spend a lot of time with that one person, having some Guinnesses and drinking at the game, whatever, and you've kind of really got to get on with someone for that to work. And it was always, we get to the end of the day and I'd always had a great time. But we started to talk a lot about just the industry. You try not to talk about work and these things, but you always end up talking that way. And we found for someone who had a purely commercial background, and Lee who's got purely technical operational leadership, our views were quite similar. It's very rare that Lee would say something like, "Oh, I don't see that at all." Lee truly understood the challenges and the limitations of the commercial side. And I think he appreciated that for a sales guy, I kind of understood the challenges from operational and from the person who's procuring. So we talked about that a lot, and that's where it started. And I think that I mentioned that the Utopia and starting on that journey was very specific at one time, but there would have been dozens of conversations that happened in the years prior that led to us getting to that point.
And do you think that, you've talked about your backgrounds a little bit, but in what ways do you think those diverse backgrounds, have shaped the company's mission from day one? Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I think it gives us a kind of a board to bounce off each other. We're able to actually give our experiences together because it's so diverse. My experience of working at a charity for 10 plus years obviously brings in that kind of effect that makes me want to be looking at more of an ESG scenario. That it's even worse than that. The fact that, well, it's not even worse, but it's even more impactful is the fact that it was an environmental charity. So that obviously pushes my kind of want to do more for charities, but also to do more for the environment. That would be something that I wouldn't be able to bring to if it weren't my experience. So those experiences come in. My experience as an engineer means the fact that I focus very much on making sure that what we deliver for a customer is exactly what they need. We're not going to try to sell them something that they don't need, because that doesn't work. My whole history of my life is trying to make things work, and choosing the wrong product is never going to be what would be coming from me. And I think those experiences definitely come to it, but also regarding Dan's knowledge and experiences brings in the right way of dealing with it to make sure we have those engagements, both with the customer from a financial scenario, but also making sure that vendors and suppliers are getting what they need. So the whole idea is to make sure everybody gets what they want and what they need, and not trying to make sure that one entity doesn't, and that should never happen.
I think Lee's right. I mean, listen, Lee is an advisor in our business, but he has other responsibilities. I think Lee's got to trust that what I'm saying to each of the suppliers or delegates of events that we do, or any of the sort of the potential customers, if he's not able to, we're saying the same message and he knows what's been said, and there is that kind of trust there. But it's just because he's qualified it with me enough over the years that we're both seeing the same thing here. We both want Utopia Cyber to be the same thing. And whilst growth and profitability will be important, never above the other areas of focus that I'm sure we'll talk about later in the podcast.
So just leading on from that, how do you integrate the community impact and obviously these philanthropic efforts into your daily operations and your business model as such?
Yeah, and I think you're talking about the history and what we've been through. As Dan said, we both grew up in the same town. And if you don't know, Rochdale is quite a poor area. But one thing it is famous for is the co-op. And I reference this over and over again, the fact that for me, the community side that we grew up in is, it's essential. We didn't have anything, but we always used to help out everybody else. I remember where I lived, things would happen. Somebody have a problem. I remember climbing in through somebody's window late at night because they locked the keys in the house. But nobody ever thought I was going to be breaking in because they knew us. Everybody knew each other, and therefore everybody knew what was going on. That's the community side, and that thing's quite important. But say co-op, the co-op was designed to make sure that there's a community going ahead and people were never left behind. I think that's part of our ethos as an entity.
Sure. So if we go back to when we started, it wasn't there at all. It was something that we thought we were doing something really positive, and we still believe we are in the cybersecurity industry. We then attended an event last year. Lee, myself, David was also involved with the business. And we sat, I remember it was it's another pub, it was Brewdog on Deansgate. And we both, the three of us went, right, we look at this in a very different way. I've only ever been the sponsor of that, someone who's had a stand at an event or done the speed dating or something like that. Lee speaks at events every few weeks. He's done that in the time that I've worked in the UK and Europe. David has attended dozens of these things, hundreds of these things as a delegate. So we could all sit around this table and go, right, did we all get value out of this? As a sponsor, do we get value? Not really. As a delegate, and if you were a speaker, was it a great thing? We all thought, actually, no. So we had a conversation at that point that started saying, well, do we go into the event space? Do we try and become a company that competes with the existing event companies? We've got a compelling story, right? We've got 3 different perspectives and we can all work. None of us could really get that excited about the idea of profiteering from it. But then the idea came around the table of going, well, why can't we make an impact in this way of doing these events, doing them in the same structure in the way that they're done, but all of the proceeds that we make go to charity and good causes? Suddenly, we all got really excited about that idea, and it was a way to make a really good positive impact to show that to show what we were doing, but we're not profiteering from it. We're making this significant change, and that was a sort of a key moment on that. But then we've moved forward and gone, well, with everything that we do, with the brokering, with this, with future plans that we have for the business moving forward, every single time there will be a transaction with Utopia Cyber UK, somebody outside of that company will benefit from it. And that's something that we're just not going to deviate from moving forward. It's something that's fundamental. So as important as that, me and Lee talking in that pub one time, where there wasn't a beer involved, there was definitely at least one beer on the table when we talked at the Brewdog at that time after that event. But it's really shaped the future of the business. And every decision that we make moving forward, everything we talk about, it's like, right, well, how can we use this to grow the business, but also put some money into the pockets of worthwhile causes and whatever. Sorry, I keep bringing pubs up. We haven't spent that much time in pubs. I keep bringing it up.
There is a theme.
I was thinking with the amount of times we mentioned a certain Scottish company that they should be looking at trying to invest, sponsor an event. I do know the CISO of that company, so realistically, I hope he watches this video, and I'm thinking of you at this point.
I'm pretty sure as well, if memory serves correct, last time we all actually seen each other in person, we had a beer in our hand.
I don't think I had. I think I had a Coke, and I think Dan was probably that. I think it might have been you two.
So, look, what do you think is you talked about this again and touched it, but just getting into it a bit more, what do you think some of the biggest disconnects are in terms of the cyber sector's commercial focus and ultimately its social responsibilities?
I'll say this, and I'll say this from one side, and Lee can talk about it from the complete other end. I don't think, if you were to walk into a event like the one that we were attending, if you were to go to that event 20 years ago, other than cyber security being referred to as information security, and there probably wouldn't have been a cyber security section to it, but the stands and the way in which people interact and the way hasn't changed. There's very little, obviously, mention of AI and things that have moved. Technology's moved forward, but the way in which the status quo of how to source and procure technology and services hasn't moved forward in 20 years. There's a lot of processes that are the same way they were back when I first started in the industry, but the world's moved on. And I think that's, for me, is a point of what we're doing is quite innovative, but it's also simplifying matters. There's only so many hours in the day. I'm pretty convinced that if Lee wanted to, he could spend every minute of his working day speaking to a supplier or a vendor, or there's enough of those people wanting to speak to him. But what we're wanting to do is simplify it and make it a little bit simpler. But also, let's be frank, I don't believe as an industry as a whole, we see an awful lot of benefiting good causes. It's not one I see it. There are some, and there are some organisations out there, but there's not an awful lot. So it's not like I can list off a great arsenal of different organisations that are doing positive impact in that way. So what we're really wanting to do is simplify the process, help organisations secure themselves and save money. But every time we're doing it, we're doing something really positive outside of cyber as well.
Yeah, well, we certainly commend you on your efforts with this, and you've talked about a little bit about obviously the true meaning of community, and yes, we're the few of us are old enough to remember the original term of community before it became a buzzword. But what drives your commitment, aside from what you've maybe talked about already, to ensuring that cyber becomes a force for real good?
It's a hard one to answer because it's just part of us. Is an honest scenario. We have said, and I've said this direct to Dan, that if we start moving to a model where we're not doing this, I'll walk away. Because for me, it's essential. We are lucky to work in this industry. As an honest scenario, there's people trying to get in the industry, can't get in the industry because there is an issue regarding recruitment. As an honest scenario, getting somebody into the industry, everybody wants a fixed model. But that's reducing the fact that we, as security professionals, probably get more money than most people, as an honest scenario. Why should we be making that money? Why should there be such a big disconnect regarding other people? And realistically, for me, I do it. I go out to events, and Dan said this. I go out to events, and I've always gone out to events and bring back all the swag that I can collect. And I don't bring it back for myself. It comes back into the office and it gets given to everybody. Because we should never say this is mine. I grew up in a situation where I used to be a civil engineer. I'd get loads of bottles of wine from suppliers at Christmas. What we used to do is raffle them because you put it in and everybody else should get the perks. Why is it I get the perks and nobody else gets it? That's my mentality. My sister, she lives in a council estate. She's got all the problems with it. But what I do is invite her over to see our house so she can get a relaxing scenario where she doesn't have to feel like it's a nightmare to put money on, get things on the table and stuff like that. It should be what we're doing, and for me, doing the bit for a charity to make sure that the charity gets something to help that community is essential. And I'll walk away if we don't do that from this point.
Fortunately, he's not going to walk away because that's never that. I've said on too many things, it's gone too many documents. We will not deviate from this, and we won't. I'm quite fortunate, guys, if I'm honest. As a business advisor and someone to work with on a day-to-day basis, Lee gets this, and if anything, I've bought into this more and more as we've gone on this journey. I just think that there's so much more that we can do. This is literally just the beginning about it. I actually think that as we progress as a business and we hit the milestones revenue we want to hit, the amount of money from that revenue that will go to charity and good causes will be phenomenal. I don't think there'll be many companies in the UK that percentage-wise will be doing what we're doing. We had a conversation a few months ago, do we go down the route of being a charity? Actually, we can give more money by not being. We can grow a successful business and give so much of that and put that in great directions. But I think the thing that's going to be really important as well, and the thing that Lee and I and David were all looking forward to, is when we've got this money and we're going to give it to these good causes, is going seeing how they spend it, going seeing how it's benefiting them. The first charity that we chose for the event that we did in March had a massive personal impact on Lee and on myself. Both members of our family were treated by this hospice in the last days of their lives. Like, it's going to see them and see it, like the £5,000 that we donated. It will be a really emotional experience for both Lee and I, but we can do this for every single organisation that we help with. It's great promotion for them, it's great promotion for us, but also we get to be part of it. That you can't put money on that. There's no amount of salary or income that you could put. That will be one of the best working days of my life. It's getting in to see, and we'll be able to do it over and over again moving forward. And the exciting thing is, this is just the beginning. And the projections that we're making forward are really realistic. We just need the industry to support us in doing it.
I certainly appreciate you both sharing. And first, Lee and Daniel, I'm sorry for both of your losses as well. And thank you for your contributions to the region. I'm sure the community, myself and Jay, we will support your efforts moving forward and certainly shine light upon any fundraising that you're doing in the future. Now, we've spoke about obviously breaking the mold when it comes to cybersecurity procurement. So, Daniel, how does your innovative broker service model transform the traditional and somewhat cumbersome cybersecurity procurement process?
Sure. So in my 20 years in the industry, probably 17 of those have been working for what you'd regard as a reseller or an MSSP, managed service provider, whatever term you want to use. And this model has been pretty typical. A customer would go and speak to, we've got requirements, we'll go and speak to somebody, they'll give them some advice and a point and point them in the right direction. They'll go and deal register that with many different vendors and bring those vendors in, and then there will be a margin that they will add to whatever cost comes over from that provider or from that technology company, and that's it. And so when I was sitting having this painful meeting with my broker, I was like, there's a lot of middlemen there. There's a lot of, and that comes with resource, that comes with cost, that comes with just time of having to speak to all these different people. And I was like, why can't we simplify it? Why can't we build a consultancy business where you take, if you're thinking about the top 4 consultancy firms, if you were to invite them in to advise on a project, with all due respect to all of them, I think the individuals you invite in probably wouldn't have the commercial experience that I have. They definitely wouldn't have the technical experience, operational experience that this man has. And we can, if we were like, well, if we can provide that and put them in touch with the right people, we can get very fair and transparent fees for making those recommendations. But once we make that recommendation, Lee and I can support the customer on making the right technical decision, the right operational decision, and making sure they pay the right price for it. And we get a very fair nominal fee for our figures. A nominal fee for the work that we deliver. It just seemed to be, and that's where the Utopia name came from originally. It was like, well, it's a perfect situation for them. It's a perfect situation for the utopian situation for the supplier, for the customer, and then we in the middle are able to grow a sustainable business doing the right thing by everybody. And that's kind of why we think we're simplifying the model and we're adding some real good to the world. Then we've added to that with all of the social enterprise impact with the charities and everything like that. So yeah, I think for me, that's where I think we're going to make a fundamental difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're already seeing it as well, because what we're seeing is we're seeing people who are also in, my level of role who are going to say, let us know how we can help. And that shows that we're doing something. People want to be involved, but not saying, I want to be involved because we're going to take some out of the business. They're just saying, how can I help? How can I make this worthwhile? And the amount of people that have come to us and said, this is important, what you're doing, shows it's something that's needed. And that's fundamental. It makes a big difference to me and Dan, knowing full well that something that we thought about in a pub is making people think of it's a great idea. And it just needs to change. And that's what we are trying to do. I say I'm an advisor and we've got other advisors in the organization. And the whole point is the organization will continue to do this. And that's what we want to do. But the interactions from everybody has just been incredible.
No, that's good to hear. And I certainly feel it takes away that bias that can sometimes be involved in the purchasing process. You've got VARs and MSPs, for instance, who've got existing contracts and commitments to certain vendors. And more often than not, they would try and shoehorn those solutions in at the detriment of the end client. So do commend you on that.
I was just saying, but if you look at it from the other side, you can talk about this in this way and go, right, Lee in his current role or people in a similar role, I can totally see the benefit. We simplify matters and that's it. Look at it from the other perspective, look at it from the vendors and the MSSPs or whatever. We are effectively no win, no fee lead generation for those guys. If we bring them an opportunity, with all due respect, a lot of lead generation people are just come out of university, very new to the cyber industry or even to industry as a whole. Lee and I have been around for a long time. If we're bringing something to them, they know it's well qualified. They know that there's a real requirement there. They know we've probably got an idea of what the budget is, so we're not going to put them forward if they're too expensive or way too cheap and not right. So it's a well qualified opportunity. If they're successful, they pay us a transparent and fair fee. But if they're not successful, they don't pay us anything. So it's really good for them as well.
And are there any other ways that perhaps this approach better supports smaller businesses compared to the conventional method?
I think there's it will help whole businesses, but I think one of the things, previously working for a small organisation, one of the things that they have is they can't afford the bigger kind of tools and the more expensive tools, and therefore they don't get. They end up looking at open source and they look at cheaper ways of doing things, which might not be the best, but also the fact that they may not have the people with experience. So we know full well the fact that trying to, there is a probably a ceiling when you start looking at bringing in an IT manager. That's probably going to be 200 people working for your company. Up to that point, you're probably not going. They're unlikely to have somebody with a CISO role until they get over 1,000. And it's that kind of thing that means they don't have the expertise. So we bring that knowledge in, but also through our connections, we also bring the expertise that maybe not within ourselves, because we do have this scenario where we have other advisors that come along and advise to make sure that the right tool is the right for them. But also, we also speak to organizations that are bringing new technologies in that actually can't be sold, or the larger organizations don't want to sell them because they won't bring enough revenue in. Those tools might actually be useful for the smaller organizations, and they might actually come along gain from that ability to be able to buy a smaller product that is actually not on the sales sheets of a larger reseller.
The great thing about DTX as an event for us, it's the first trade show that we've done, and it was a hectic couple of days, which is brilliant, but it was great to market test what we were saying with a really broad audience. And probably the best feedback was from somebody who was head of cybersecurity for one of the largest councils in the Northwest. And he was listening to what was being said, and he came back over and he said, the best way I'd explain what you guys are doing is I can effectively get you, Daniel, and Lee as part of my team for making these decisions and whatever free of charge. That's it. So if you're a small business, you could have someone who can come in and do that sort of CISO advisor in regards to helping you make the right decision on what you're doing. And then the procurement person, that company who's probably got very limited cybersecurity experience, can have someone of 20 years commercial experience helping to guide them on what they're doing. And they're not footing the bill. The person who ends up being successful foots the bill. So it's free of charge. So that's where I really think we could probably be quite impactful in helping small businesses. But I think the one thing that Lee's pointed out, it's not just small businesses. This model can actually simplify things for larger businesses as well. And some pretty large councils have spoke to us and gone, well, if you deliver on what you say you're going to do, you're going to help us an awful lot, because we can't go out and speak to the likes of KPMG or Deloitte, these top 4 consultancy firms, and pay the figures that we'll need to pay to get them on board to help us. But we can do that, and we've definitely got the experience and the know-how in the cyber industry to make that happen.
There's certainly a tremendous need for that. Jay and myself are involved in a lot of meetings, and one thing that comes up quite a lot is the price tag on the enterprise grade expertise. But one thing we do as a talent acquisition partner, we open up those corridors for organizations to tap into that integrated resource. So much similar to what you're doing, but from a people perspective. And one thing you mentioned earlier, that perhaps you're having conversations with the vendors. So I'm curious to gain 2 perspectives from each of you around the challenges that you face when it comes to convincing either the clients or vendors, for instance, to embrace more transparent and accessible procurement process.
This is where me and Dan look at each other and go, who wants to start on this one? For me, the challenge I've had from a person that's procuring is the fact that we're going out to these channel partners to say we'd like to buy something, and they've got a very limited kind of scope, and they're saying this is what you need. Now I'm looking across the industry with my role and already looking at all the tools, but they might not sell that tool. And I may have a procurement team that says you must buy through this partner. That's a nightmare. So what I do then is I would work with, in this scenario, if I was bringing in Utopia Cyber to help me in this scenario, I'd go and say which products are actually suitable for me, and then I'd find a relevant channel partner, and with Utopia Cyber to get them to provide us that service. That is something that is not coming, because when we're looking at the channel partner will go, this is what we sell and that's what you got to deal with. That rules out a lot of tools, and that doesn't work for me as a person that wants to bring the tool in. So I can give you another one now, so I think I might as well carry on there. Is the other issue I've got is regarding deal reg. And it's been mentioned before, deal reg is a nightmare for us because I've been it where I've looked at a product and this product I wanted to bring in, but I wanted to bring in as a managed service. So when I brought it in, they would run that service once every quarter for me. That's all I needed. And I had an organization said that they'd be willing to do that for me. But somebody else found out that I was looking at this product and deal regged it. So actually, the original company that I was discussing regarding doing a managed service for us once a quarter could no longer sell it for me to me. And that made it impossible for me to buy the product that I really liked. And that destroyed any chance of me buying that product. So what happened then is I didn't buy the product. It became something that actually had to be removed from my roadmap, and that's awful.
I think to build on what Lee said, and it was a point that I was going to make. So go back 20 years when I entered the industry, I worked for a company called Vicestorm. At the moment, at that time in the UK, there's probably 5 companies that did what Vicestorm did in regards to, I think, Computer Center did it, Integralis for a company at the time I ended up working for. Vicestorm were definitely like 3 of like the main ones that were out there that had specialist information security skills, as it was at the time. We did everything. We did the scope, we did the demonstrations, we did the scoping, we did the delivery, and we did the managed service. So as an organization, we had a limited number of technology vendors because there wasn't hundreds and thousands out there like there is right now. We had a limited number of people that we worked with, and all of the sales team and all of the pre-sales team, the technical guys, could speak about each proposition, could speak about the differences, could talk about the technical benefits of one over the other, could scope it, could deliver it, could demonstrate it. All of that skill came from the reseller. But as time's gone on, it's now gone to the point of, in my previous role, we had over 140 vendors that we procured solutions from or technology from in the last year that I was in that job. There is no way that any of my team or myself could understand the relevant propositions of each of those 140 vendors and be able to differentiate between them. It's impossible. You're effectively gone from being a specialist organization to the Tesco of the cybersecurity world. And that's no disrespect to Tesco. They do a good job. But I wouldn't say that they're a specialist in each of the area that they exist in. They're just providing the products for it. And I think that's where the shift has kind of gone for me. I think if Lee was to be honest about his engagement with vendors, resellers, what now, you'd probably say 90% of the engagement is done by the vendor and 10% is done by the reseller. So you could argue that's the way the money should be split, right? But it isn't. That's not the way the money's split. I've been there. It's not. So I think that there's an element of going, the industry's changed. The dependency on the technical expertise of each of the vendors and managed service providers has grown. And the resellers' value that they add now has changed somewhat. And deal registration 20 years ago was valuable. The partners earned that protection that they get from deal registration. That's probably a better way of describing it. It's not deal registration, it's deal protection. You're protecting that a certain company can make a margin of a certain amount, and that's what you're giving them. You're gifting them that. That used to come with having to earn it by being able to own part of that process. So a lot of times we used to do deals and the vendor never got involved until they were processing an order. We'd do all of the work. But that doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. The vendors do the majority of the work and the scoping and whatever, and that's why I think that model is outdated. And I always thought that from a commercial side. Lee completely agrees it does from the other side.
I certainly agree. I think what you're doing is certainly disruptive. And Daniel or Lee first, perhaps, how do you craft events that inspire, educate, and drive positive change? Because getting all of those three together is certainly a challenge.
Yeah, so from our side, when we're talking about bringing in events like the one we've previously done, we look at trying to engage everybody at the right level. So we look to bring in the people who are experienced. We won't just bring somebody who comes in who wants to, if we're doing a meal scenario, we're not going to bring somebody in who just wants to come for a free meal. The whole point is, why do people go to those events? So what we want to do is make sure everybody gets something out of it. If I turn up for an event and I just sit there and I don't hear anything that's useful for me, what am I going for? I'm just going for a free meal. That's not useful for my time. I want to go there and learn off my, other people in the same situation, and be able to sometimes, and I know it sounds weird, but sometimes vent. because there is a organisation events where you go out and you want to vent and you want to say what the problems are and how are you feeling. We all need somebody to talk to, and those events are quite useful for that. But that's not just about us, it's also about what does the vendor gain from it. The vendor needs to gain from it, but also, it must have a reason to exist. And I think we hit them all with our events.
And Daniel, how do you encourage your attendees to view cybersecurity through more of a human lens?
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of build on what Lee said, I think that we don't just look at the events from the perspective of the delegate. Delegates are absolutely key, but the events don't happen without the speakers or without the sponsors. Everyone needs to get their sort of value from it. We've looked at the events in regards to the sponsorship, what ones where we've sponsored it or I've been as a sponsor before. If you're going and there's 150 delegates there and you're only guaranteed to speak to 15 of them, and you're spending in excess of like 15, 20, it's not a great return on the investment. So what we're wanting to do is create a model that's actually really valuable to all parties. So everyone comes away from it. If everyone leaves and they go and stand around the table at a brewdog after the event, they feel like everyone can feel like they got really good value for that time and effort. And, with the quality of the people that they meet, the amount of time that they get with the sponsors and the delegates, and the social impact that comes from that event. If it ticks all those boxes, and it's quite, in fact, if you're putting these things together, even as recently as yesterday, as going down to London and to Birmingham and looking at venues and whatever, I'm really blessed. I've got Lee, I've got David, my other person involved in the business, who I can bounce these ideas off and go, guys, you go to these things. You're on the receiving end of it. Will this work for you? Does this resonate? And so we've got really good perspective from each side, but the idea is going that everyone who comes away from it thinks that was a really good 2 or 3 hours of my time. I enjoyed myself. It was good. I learned something, but also I got to speak to the right people if you're a sponsor. Another thing that's really important as well is we're not here to profiteer from it. So from a sponsorship perspective, the numbers that a sponsor's paying to do one of our events will probably be less than 2/3 what they'd pay to do it at something else. So it allows us to be able to speak to companies who might not be able to afford to come and to be an exhibitor at another event. They can come to ours because the price point is right, and of that price point, all of the proceeds of it go to charity. So we're doing something that actually benefits all parties. It's not just benefiting just the delegate, even though the delegates are so key to something like this.
That's certainly a benefit for that. And where we've seen success in the past, for me personally, when I've held sort of leadership dinners with technology and security leaders, we've always restricted it to around about 12 attendees to encourage groups of 4 to converse and have real quality conversations. Because I've known of events that have been packed and there's been no knowledge transfer or no opportunity to vent, as you said.
So, guys, listen, I appreciate you sharing it, and as Warren says, love the fact that you're disrupting a lot of antiquated practices within the industry. Let's take a look at a bit more predictions for going forward, and maybe a big open-ended question as it is, but what do you think the ideal cybersecurity landscape is going to look like by, say, 2030? Let's go 5 years from now.
I don't know whether it's ideal. I don't think there's ever an ideal cybersecurity scenario. Where do I think it's going to be?
That's not a bit of an oxymoron.
Yeah. I think there's never an ideal because I think there's always going to be battles. I think for organisations, I think there's going to be a requirement to be demonstrating our security more than we have previously. And I have been doing a lot of talks lately regarding the difference in between being secure and being compliant. And I think that's going to change a lot over the future. And I think organizations with things like DORA and NIS2 and the CRA, things like this are going to make organizations want to demonstrate they are secure, but that's going to have to be led by people saying, prove to me first that you're secure. And I think there's going to be a lot more people coming into the cyber industry that are saying, demonstrate you're secure. And that's going to be a good thing because at the moment, people are getting away with doing the bare minimum by using legacy ways of validating the secure.
So just segueing in from that, how do you guys feel? You've talked a little bit about this already, of course, in previous answers, but how about in terms of embracing a truly human-centric approach? How do you think that would transform our industry's future?
think being open and honest is going to make a massive difference, because at the moment we are, as an industry, we are demonstrating things are secure by using something that maybe doesn't demonstrate. I think we're being open and honest. I can talk about my opinion on a certain password manager company that have been hacked, and I've had this kind of quite kind of thing put to me. Why do you trust them? And I trust them because they've come along and said this has happened, and this is what we've done to fix it. I think that is a massive difference, and I think as we're being open and honest in community as a community and talking about what's going on and what our experiences, that's going to help people to be open, because open and saying this has gone wrong, how do I fix it, is a lot better than going everything's great and sitting in the background being that duck with the feet under the water trying to flap away, trying to keep yourself going. But it's, a swan, isn't it? So sat there all looking like there's nothing wrong, but actually you're churning away in the background. We have to be honest, and that helps us keep people in the business. We also make sure people realize that there's no nirvana. We are pushing towards getting a nirvana, but you're never going to reach it, and we have to make sure people are supported in the journey. So I'm doing a talk. I'm on a panel next month regarding the impacts of uh, an incident on individuals as you're dealing with it, and I think that's quite important. That the social side of it, have a voice, make sure you listen to people, is quite important.
I think as well, to look at it from my perspective and my background, I said this when we had the dinner, and I'll explain it. I think from a growth perspective, the bubble has burst in cyber. It's still a very lucrative industry, but I've been in this 20 years and I've seen it go from being something that was, if there was an information security breach, it'd be mentioned in the back pages of the Financial Times. Now, if there's a major one, it's on the front page of the Sun. And so that huge growth and importance of this as a topic has shown a huge amount of growth. But we've gone from being, maybe, let's say 15 years ago, there was probably 10 or 12 companies in the UK that would deliver managed SOC services. And the last time I checked it was nearly 300. It is a hugely saturated market. The need has gone up, but not to the level of that point of growth and that number of people out there. And I think from speaking to vendors and speaking to providers, there's not enough business to go around. There isn't to support growth in all of those organizations. So there is going to be challenging times there. And I think Lee used a really good word of transparency. We're not saying to people do things differently. We're saying just be a bit open about what you're doing. And let's talk about what, with every fee that we charge or every interaction that we have, we are going to be transparent to the customer and to everyone about what we're making, what we're doing. I think there's still too much that's done behind closed doors, and still too much that organizations are in the dark about. Budgets are either staying the same or in some cases going down. It's difficult to give the pay rises that were once given in cyber before, have those justified. And there was a period about 10 years ago where there wasn't enough people trained in the industry, and now there's a lot of people that have gone from junior roles into senior roles. So there's not necessarily a shortage of people at that space. So I think that whilst I don't think the demand for cybersecurity is going to go away as an industry, and I agree with Lee, I think demonstrative cybersecurity is going to be really important moving forward. I do think that commercially, there's too much out there. There's too many technologies. There's too many, and it's going to be very difficult in the UK as a whole to support all of those people needing to be successful. I think the growth opportunity, that for me, that bubble has burst.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
And Lee, if you can challenge every cyber organisation to adopt one transformative practice, what would it be and why?
Well, it's got to be honest again. So we're just coming back to that one. Tell us what you're making. Tell us why there's profit. Why is it that you are giving massive discounts to larger organisations, but the smaller organisations pay full price? Be open and honest. This is a model. I'd much rather have. I love the idea of a SaaS platform where you just know what everybody pays. Why is it one organisation pays more than everyone else? And generally that affects the smaller organisations. And I'd much rather be open and honest and say why they give it, because there is reasons why economies of scale works. But don't then have the salesperson saying to you, "Oh, we give you the best deal." You're getting the best deal, but you're not getting the best deal because we can't give you the best deal because you're smaller. Be open and honest about it and say the truth.
And Dan, from your perspective, are there any emerging solutions or technologies that are exciting you at the moment? And if so, how are they reshaping the industry?
When we had a dinner at the end of March, we talked about this at the end, and I said the effect that AI is going to have in our industry, even though people know it's going to be big, I don't think they realise how big it's going to be. There will be an emergence of AI, brand new AI-driven technologies and services that are going to have a massive effect. We met with one a couple of weeks ago, and Lee was ridiculously impressed by it. This is just the first of a flow of it. There is going to be, that is going to have a massive impact. But I do make the point that Lee says in regards to transparency. If the existing vendors and service providers start to use AI, meaning that jobs are cut and people aren't needed anymore, there's not much eyes on glass needed because we can automate it, great. Pass the savings on to customers. I don't think you'll see massive reductions in costs. No vendors across the vendor landscape of the UK cybersecurity market are talking about reducing costs or bringing costs down. Generally, they're going up by 15, 20% every time you go around to renew. But AI is supposed to be improving efficiencies and driving costs down. Isn't that is a level of hypocrisy there? So I think that AI is going to have a huge effect. I think there'll be a lot of new vendors, and it's exciting times to see these vendors come. I think some of the existing vendors need to be transparent about how they're using it and transparent about the impact that's having on their operational costs. Well, whether they'll do that or not is another matter, but I think that would be my thing. I would say if I'm in Lee's position, that would be the thing that I'd be challenging my existing providers on. But if you're talking about using AI, great. That's helping you make more money. Don't put our costs up by 20% because there's no justification for that.
I've had a few conversations with organisations that are planning to downsize teams in view of LLMs or SLMs, for instance, to automate things in the background. And the conversation that I've had in the past, it reverts back to the energy cost and the cost of tokenization because they've got a lot of traffic coming through from their clients. So I feel that's something that we're going to hear a lot of. Yes, it improves efficiencies, but it's not a positive thing for the environment, is it?
So look, with the growing online risks, we know it's crucial for teachers and parents and caregivers to help children develop positive digital habits and stronger cyber hygiene. And we know that the challenge is going to be equipping those that influence, with the right knowledge and resource. And we feel, at Secure Cyber Connect, this is especially important for ensuring we have a pipeline of talent interested in joining the security industry in the future. We'd love to hear your advice on how to inspire and engage maybe young minds in this field. And so, I suppose the first question is, what do you think the most important cyber hygiene practices that teachers and parents should be teaching children in helping build a positive online culture?
Yeah, being open again, open and honest again. No, I've done it myself with my kids. So my kids, I took them to events and made them feel confident regarding security. So we were going to B-sides. Those are guys, what it is. I took my kids to B-sides and they got involved in it. They didn't feel like it was something different. They just felt it was something that we would normally do. I think the problem is the teachers don't have the understanding, and therefore they're in a situation where they're trying to talk about something that they don't really know. So what they need to do as security experts across the industry, we need to help those organizations, the teaching organizations, to try to get ideas on how they can do this and ways that can make security a lot easier and manageable. Every child learns in a different way, and therefore giving them nudges to help them along the journey is the way we need to do it. So bring security in earlier on in the scenario. We tried it regarding certain languages. Do the same for security.
You've also never had a youth that's been as invested in technology as the youth is right now. Most of them would prefer to go into Roblox and go and visit JJB Sports or JD Sports, JD Sports in Roblox and buy their trainers or buy their whatever than actually go to the Trafford Centre and do it in person. You've got a youth that's committed to this. If you gamify something, they will be more engaged in it than if you put it in a textbook or you've asked them to go and sit in a classroom. So if they're engaged in that, make it interesting, make it interactive. And you've already got platforms there. You could build a cybersecurity training platform in Roblox if you wanted to. And to be fair, I've only become aware of this, I think, in the last 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. But I think there's definitely there's a active audience, but you've got to make it engaging. And I think that's probably where cybersecurity isn't as cool as it could be, but as it should be, because you could very easily do this. And there are platforms out there, I'm not going to name them, of like user awareness training that I've done as someone who works in the cyber. I'm like, guys, this is boring and so dated. I'm not engaged with this at all. Make this something that, there's a quiz element to it at least, or there's some sort of gamified element to it. Make me feel engaged. I think if you've got that from the youth of today, that's the way I think you're going to get them to be very, very engaged. And you could do it very easily with cybersecurity.
Call of cyber. So look, for one of the other things we tend to ask our guests from time to time, and especially founders like yourselves, what's the biggest lie that you would sort of tend to share about starting a business within the cyber sector? What really is in the harsh truths are that nobody talks about that much? Lee?
I think for me is the fact that everybody thinks that you're going to make a load of money. That's the thing. Founders are going to come in and make an absolute fortune, and there is this, it's going to bring you in and we're going to sell it on to someone else. That feels like you're just putting a short-term kind of decision based on the organization. What you're trying to do is just lift and shift. That isn't the way I feel we should do stuff. And I'm in here for the long game until I die.
I think, to be honest, so having started a business, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I've worked for, you named at the start, some really massive companies, and I've worked, and Lee the same. I think you only know your area of expertise. I know sales and marketing well to a certain point. I've never marketed a startup company before. So I'm fortunate though in regards to a lot of things that we do. I can call upon Lee to sort of give me some advice and guidance as someone who's on the receiving end of what we're looking to produce. But I think as well, you've got to bring in the right level of support and expertise. And also, we brought in somebody to advise on the marketing side. Quite an expensive resource in some ways, but she's worked with 2 startups before and she gives pointers. And the perfect thing that she said was, people know you and Lee, but they know the companies also that you work for. You need to earn the right for people to know who Utopia Cyber UK are, what your message is, what your ethos is, to then earn the right to listen to how you could potentially help them. And I think if I'd have had that conversation when we first started, I'd have looked at the first 3 months very differently. Our mission for 2025 is for people in the industry to go, Utopia Cyber UK, I know what they do and I know what their message is. And coming off the back of DTX, a lot of people have just gone, oh, you were the red or blue people, weren't you? And so we did this, but the red or blue incentive that we did around the football shirts, the link below it was about the charity, and so many people I've spoken to have watched that video and shared that video because of the fact. So we're doing the right thing. I think this is the main thing that I learned from that first 3 months, and what we're going to move forward is everything's about getting our message out there, getting our ethos, what we stand for, and that's going to drive our growth moving forward. But we're going to help a lot of good causes along the way and have a lot of fun doing it. I think we're definitely doing that so far.
Well, absolutely, guys. And listen, it's been wonderful, listening to your story and your motivation. And it's very clear that from circumstance, events, your background, upbringing, everything, it's all come together to really have a huge impact on what you're doing, and really exciting to hear about it. So thank you for sharing this with our audience today. And it's been great. You've hinted at something exciting coming soon. We wanted to give you a chance to share it here first. So tell us about your upcoming podcast. What's it all about? Why should people tune in?
It's been really interesting, and this is purely by accident to you guys and to anyone watching or listening to this, that the word you've used the most about talking about what we're doing is disruptive. You've said it quite a lot on this podcast. And so we're launching our podcast, which goes by the name of Disruptor. So that works quite well. And the point of the podcast, and we'll 100% have you guys on it, is looking at people within cyber, but also outside of cyber as well, that are looking to challenge and necessarily break the status quo. Is there a status quo? Does it work? If it doesn't, what can we do differently? And how can that help the industry, or how can help the industry we're looking to target? But then also, the great thing for this as well is, how does that help others? We think we're genuinely being disruptive in a positive way to help the customers, help the providers, and help charity and third-party causes. So that's what we're looking to do with our podcast, is have people on who are who are being disruptive, but in a really positive way. How are they being disruptive? What are the challenges, and how are they sort of changing moving forward? So we start filming on that before the start of May. And the idea is that every week you'll see a different conversation around that as well. Before I get Lee to sort of give his input, the one thing that we'll be talking about in those first podcasts is we've done these dinner events. Something that we're doing in October is we're going even bigger, and we're going for our first exhibition event in the UK. It'll be in Manchester. Details will follow. It's at the end of October. 80 to 100 of security leaders. But whereas we've made a £5,000 donation to an organisation off the back of the dinner events, and we're continuing to do that, with the large event that we're going to be doing, the commitment is over £50,000 of donations to charities and good causes off the back of it. It's going to be there's going to be a big impact that comes from this, and we're delighted to be able to talk about it. It'll be talked about more on the podcast. There'll be more things going out for our social media platforms. So watch this space on that as well. That's really exciting things coming ahead.
Well, thank you guys. Absolutely great. You know, I think there's a big future for yourselves, clearly. Utopia Cyber UK, definitely a company to watch. And as you say, disrupts us from a podcast perspective. Can't wait to listen to it, guys. And for all our listeners who want to stay connected beyond this episode, aside from LinkedIn, is there anywhere else that they can reach out to you?
I mean, obviously, via the website, everything that we do is posted via the website or whatever. I will say, in regards to follow myself on LinkedIn, Lee speaks up and down the country and throughout Europe all the time. So Lee's constantly putting things out there. It's not just Utopia Cyber related, also about, his individual presenting. So really keen to support that. So give Lee a follow if you're not already following him. Everything Utopia will come out from Lee as well, but also some really interesting things about places around the UK and around Europe that he's presenting in the coming weeks and months.
Fantastic. Well, look, Lee, Daniel, I'd like to say a huge thank you to you both. I'm sure the community, all our listeners, will have found a huge amount of value in today's episode. For people to continue the discussion, for more sustained engagement, as always, we invite you to join the Secure Cyber Connect community platform, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions for tech and security professionals at no cost. These include community access, mutual mentoring, online networking sessions, and a range of exclusive interviews, such as this, panel discussions and masterclasses. Thank you very, very much, guys.
If you're struggling with cultural, technological, or talent acquisition challenges, reach out to the Secure Cyber Connect team, where we offer advice and guidance, and we're here to help.